Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of chapter 6. So in this section we're going to talk more about the sleep-wake cycle and then also explanations for dreams. So to talk about sleep in terms of the circadian rhythm, or to talk about it as a biological rhythm, we first have to discuss the stages of sleep. And among those stages there are two types. The first is non-REM sleep and the second is REM. So REM is REM, standing for rapid eye movement. So not surprising, non-REM sleep is a period of sleep where there are fewer eye movements, whereas REM sleep is associated with rapid eye movement. And when I say eye movement, I literally mean movement of the eye or eyes behind the eyelids during sleep. So non-REM sleep consists of several stages. So what happens when we start to kind of relax and drift off to sleep, we have an increase in alpha waves in our brain, and then we enter stage 1 sleep, which is small, irregular brain waves, and we're in a very light sleep so that if there was any noise or anyone touched us, we would instantly startle awake. Then we eventually move into stage 2 sleep, which involves sleep spindles, which is rapid high waves of brain activity, and minor noises like a door creaking open would not disturb you. So we start to get into deeper sleep. Stage 3 then involves delta brain waves, which is very slow waves that have high peaks. Our breathing and pulse will start to slow down as we get deeper and deeper into sleep. So then eventually what will happen is we'll enter REM sleep, which is associated with increased heart rate, blood pressure, our muscles go limp, and we have increased vivid dreaming. So we do dream during non-REM sleep, but those dreams tend to be shorter and they're less vivid. So what will happen as we get further and further into the night is we will see fluctuations in the length of these different stages, and we will increasingly spend more time in REM sleep. So we'll start to dream longer and longer later into the night, and the dreams will become more vivid. So the reason that we experience limp muscles during REM sleep is that, and maybe you've experienced this, but if you were to wake up and you're having a really vivid kind of bizarre dream, and if you were to act that dream out, you could get really hurt or hurt someone around you. So that's why it's really important for during REM sleep, our muscles essentially go offline, and then we have very active cognitive activity going on in our brain. So our REM cycle takes about 90 minutes. There's small differences between person to person, but most of the time we're going to go through the cycle every 90 minutes. So this is just to kind of show you what I mean in terms of the differences in the brain waves as we start to move through the different stages. Now I want to point out that this says stages 3 and 4. Some places you will see a fourth stage mentioned here in non-REM sleep, so don't be surprised by that. But most textbooks like yours talks about it as kind of a combined third stage. So don't be confused by that. You can just think of this whole box as stage 3. So there's been some really cool research done where they put EEG caps, and so if you can Google EEG cap if you want to see what it is, but it's this funny tight-fitting hat that you put on somebody, and it has wires connecting to it, and they can use this technology to monitor brain activities or brain waves. And so people have done sleep studies where they look at what the brain waves do as the person moves through the different stages of non-REM sleep into REM sleep. So here you can see that as the person gets kind of lower in terms of level of consciousness, so they kind of drift deeper and deeper into sleep and are less aware of their environment, there's going to be some pretty significant changes in brain activity. So again, you can see at the beginning we have these kind of quick moving alpha waves, and then the brain waves will start to kind of space out and slow down. Then as we enter stage 3, we get these very dramatic, quick moving deeper brain waves, and then as we get to stage 3, we can see that they really slow down and we get these high peaks. And then again, we see, as we move into REM sleep, even a different pattern of brain activity. So lots of changes in terms of brain activity as we move through non-REM into REM sleep, again, kind of going more towards the slow wave version of brain waves. And so this is what a typical night would look like, again, recognizing every single person's different. So this shows that, again, it's about 90-minute cycles. The person, starts the night out awake and then slowly will drift down into non-REM stage 1, spend a little time there, then go to stage 2. Then they spend quite a bit of time in stage 3, early on in the night, and then they backtrack through the cycles into REM sleep. And so again, around 90 minutes, they're going to be ending their first REM sleep cycle. Then they might even skip, non-REM sleep 1, go straight to 2, spend again quite a bit of time in 3, pop back into 2, and then again have another period of REM sleep. They might even briefly wake up at this point. I know, for many people, this is their first bathroom trip of the night as they get older. Then they go into, a very brief period of non-REM 1 to REM 2. And so again, you can see, what I want you to notice is that as the night goes on, they might not even go into stage 3 at all. Sometimes they are going to skip stage 1, and then REM sleep gets longer and longer as they go later in the night. So this is simply to say that there are multiple stages of sleep that will involve different levels of consciousness that have different patterns of brain activity, and that we see increasingly longer periods of REM sleep, which involve very vivid, often very bizarre dreams. And again, those periods will get longer throughout the night. So sleep is extremely important. It's a period that our body can basically restore itself. It repairs cells. It's going to eliminate waste. It's going to replenish energy. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but later in the semester, maybe when you're not getting as much sleep, or maybe your sleep isn't quite as restful, people tend to get sick because long periods of high quality sleep are really important for maintaining our immune system. And so as we become more sleep deprived, our immune functioning will suffer. We also see huge implications for how sleep can impact mental functioning. So we know that during sleep deprivation, our body will actually release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which can damage or impair brain cells. Your book also talks, quite a bit about how sleep can improve memory through a process called consolidation. So that's why, rather than cramming all night before an exam, you're better off trying to, study a little bit early on and then get a good night's sleep, because then the sleep that you do have will actually help you remember the things you've learned. We also know that sleep can improve problem solving. Sometimes we go to bed with a problem or something on our mind, and we wake up and instantly kind of have inspiration of how to solve the problem. So sleep is essential to maintain high functioning and healthy living. So your book also talks about several explanations for why we dream. So the first one, your book just kind of mentions in passing, but I want to spend a little bit more time talking about it because I think it's important to kind of acknowledge where this came from, and also to talk about how it's been discredited. So the first is psychoanalytic theory. And so this comes from Sigmund Freud. If you've ever heard of any psychologist in all of history, it's probably Freud. Freud is known for things like penis envy, had some very interesting ideas about our relationships with our mothers, so kind of a quirky guy, and a lot of his ideas have been miscredited. One of the things he is most famous for is his thoughts on dreams. So one of his kind of big, crowning moments in the Sun was when he talked about that dreams are a window into our minds, that dreams allow us to experience and express unconscious desires and beliefs. And that for clinical psychologists to really help patients, they have to analyze dreams. So that was one of his biggest accomplishments in his career, was really encouraging clinicians and clinical psychologists to become skilled and knowledgeable in how to interpret dreams. Okay, so again, this is based on the premise that people don't really have access or aren't really aware of what's going on within themselves, and so dreams are a way to access that unconscious information. So with that said, psychoanalytic theory has been discredited as an explanation for dreams. Okay, so this is an area of clinical psychology that most people agree that we really can't analyze dreams in the way Freud thought we could. Freud thought we were further along in understanding what dreams represent and what they mean for a person and how they could be used in a clinical setting. So if, for example, on a timed quiz, I were to ask you, which explanation or which theory of dreams has largely been discredited or disproven, the answer would be psychoanalytic, which again was Freud's kind of one of his major contributions. So even though we don't truly understand what dreams are or what we can do with information from dreams, there are a few kind of leading theories on what dreams represent. So the first is called problem focused. And so for your activity, when I ask you to talk about a dream, you could use the problem focused approach to explain it. If you explain it with a problem focused approach, you're essentially saying that the brain is continuing to process a problem even though it's asleep. And so most of us, as we're falling asleep, our minds may be blank, but then all of a sudden we start to think about, maybe a homework question we don't know how to answer, or maybe we have some big financial dilemma. And so the problem focused explanation for dreaming is essentially the mind is going to keep working on a problem that's present from when we're awake, and sometimes we actually get insight in how to solve it when we're asleep. That would make sense in explaining any dream where maybe the person is dreaming about some problem that they have going on. Okay, so that's kind of one piece of evidence for why that approach maybe does explain some dreams. But at the same time, the cognitive approach also applies to some dreams because, again, it's similar in that it's where the brain continues to do similar cognitive work. It continues to process and think in a way similar to when it's awake, but it's different in that it doesn't assume the person's ever going to solve the problem. Because, oftentimes when we're dreaming, there's some maybe bizarre content or maybe something kind of weird and unique. And so the cognitive approach helps us better understand that we're generating dreams in the same way that we have typical thoughts, but we're not getting any sensory input, right? We're not looking around, we're not smelling, hearing, right? There's no incoming information. It's basically your brain just, continuing to mull on anything it was thinking about before. Okay, so the cognitive approach is similar to the problem focused, but doesn't assume the person would actually generate a solution to the problem, and again helps us understand how maybe some of the content's a little bit weird. Activation synthesis theory, on the other hand, 100% focuses on weird, bizarre dreams. It essentially says that the brain is going to continue to fire, and that it's mostly random neural activity in lower parts of the brain that then the cerebral cortex has to interpret. Because when the brain receives neural information from other areas of the brain, it's got to do something with it. And so these kind of random firings of neural activity lead the brain to generate some really bizarre, interesting content. And so as we kind of move down this list from problem focus to cognitive to activation synthesis, we're increasingly able to explain the kind of unusual content that many of our dreams contain. Overall, what we know about dreams is that they're really weird at times. Sometimes they're relevant to things happening in our lives. Sometimes they absolutely do indicate something. Like I know that I have a lot of dreams that seem to have something to do with anxiety, and I know that I have anxiety. And so to me, those things make sense. But does that explain why I had a dream the other night, that had like dragons in it? No, not at all. Like, is the dragon my anxiety? Am I the dragon? What's happening, right? So the one thing that we know about dreams is that we don't fully understand dreams, but these are some of the leading theories of how we can explain the content and explain the purpose, again, with the exception of the psychoanalytic theory, which has been largely discredited.